Hey guys, happy Tuesday. I hope that day one went well for you. Hopefully you were able to figure out what your teachers were asking for and figure out your assignments for all of your classes. Thank you for getting to work on our stuff pretty quickly. I see that a lot of you have turned stuff in, which is wonderful because you've got more new stuff coming today. So I'm going to start out with just a little bit of an overview of what you are working on today, and then I'll get into some details about the assignment. I will try to go through this quickly. It's going to be a little bit longer, but it's important information, so please stick with it. So today, what you are going to be focusing on and looking at is predominantly the Globe Theater. Now, you may have heard of the Globe Theater before. If you have ever encountered Shakespeare in your English classes previously, you probably have heard the Globe Theater mentioned, and you might even know some details about it. The Globe Theater was the primary stage where Shakespeare produced his plays. Okay, now why is it important that we know about the Globe Theater? Why does that matter? Why can't we just get into the text and start talking about Romeo and Juliet and what's going on within the story? Well, the thing is, with the genre of plays, with the written form of plays, they're really meant to be performed and not just read. And the unfortunate thing is that, especially with what we're working with now, we don't really get to see the performance of it. We're mostly going to be reading it and listening to parts of it. But a play is so much different than a book. A book is really written to be read, right? And when you read a book and then you see the movie, it's really easy to notice the differences between the two because books were not created with the intention of becoming movies. Plays, on the other hand, are written for the purpose of being performed, to be seen, to be heard, to be watched. So it's a very different genre. So the fact that this play that Shakespeare wrote in Romeo and Juliet as a play, it's really important that we understand what the setting was like, what the Globe Theater was like, because it's a totally different experience than if you were to just sit down and read the play or read a book. It's a vastly different experience for the audience in this situation. So when you think about it, when you think of sitting at home alone, maybe watching a sitcom or a comedy movie, and something funny happens, the majority of people who would be watching that by themselves would probably not laugh. They might internally think, oh, this is funny, but they don't express that. They don't necessarily laugh out loud. Some of you might. My husband does. I don't. Okay? So people respond differently, but most people, when they're watching something like that, they don't express it as you would when you're with other people. The Globe Theater was very much an interactive environment where people not only watched what was happening, but they responded. And sometimes they would even yell at the actors, they would kind of jest at them, they would interact with them as they were performing. And laughter, emotions are infectious and they're contagious. So if you were standing next to someone else who was laughing and you thought it was funny, you'd be much more likely to laugh in that situation than you would if you were sitting on the couch by yourself watching something funny. Okay, so that's one of the ways in which viewing a play is totally different than reading it. The other thing that makes understanding the play and the production side of the play so important is that, especially in the case of Shakespeare or any of these Renaissance writers or these traditional English writers that you might come across, it makes the language so much easier to understand, right? If we look at Shakespeare and what he wrote just on a piece of paper, it can sometimes be really overwhelming and super confusing, and we might just kind of give up and say, this does not make sense to me, I don't enjoy it, next, okay? But if you see it acted out, it's a whole different situation, right? Because now we get to see facial expressions. We get to hear those shifts in tone and understand, oh, he's being sarcastic right now, or, oh, she's really mad. Whereas if you're just reading it on a piece of paper, that might not come across, okay? You also have the addition of props and movement. All of those things together really give you kind of that production feel that a play is intended to have. With the exception of the stage directions, which if you were looking at the written version of the play, you would see are written maybe in italics or in parentheses. Plays are written entirely in dialogue. Okay, so when you are reading a play, it can be super confusing to keep track of who's speaking, and it's hard even for me, who, I've read a ton of plays. It's hard for me sometimes to follow like who's speaking and kind of track back and forth and jump back and forth constantly because it's solely dialogue. Whereas with the book, you get some summary and some background, and you get breaks in between characters speaking, and it's a lot easier in a book to kind of track through the storyline. Whereas with the play, because of that shift, that constant shift in dialogue, it can be much more challenging. All right, so this altogether is why it is so important that we really understand what this Globe Theater was like, because the experience for those who attended these plays was super unique, was super entertaining and interactive. Like I said before, it's almost like a spectator sport that these people are going to see. Just a very different environment than what we would have as opposed to just, reading the play together. Okay, so we'll try to give you as much of that as possible as we are looking at the text together, but I want you to keep that in your mind, that as we're reading, as we're going through this, the whole thing is meant to be seen and heard, and not just seen on a piece of paper. All right, so with that, your assignment today is waiting for you in Google Classroom. It is a Google slideshow. You'll open it up and you'll see right off the bat that you've got a couple of options. Option number 1 is to watch a video that is within those slides there, and then play a Kahoot that follows just to kind of review and make sure that you got all the information that I wanted you to retain. And then option number 2, if you would prefer to do this instead of option 1, is to continue to go through the slides, and you'll see that there are various components of the Globe Theater with links to different websites with background information on the Globe that I want you to read and go through and review. Okay, so those are 2 options to kind of get started, just to become familiar with the Globe Theater. Okay, then what all of you need to do, regardless of which option you choose, is for sure look at the 2 slides that have a black background. Okay, I think they are slides like 2 and 3 or 3 and 4, somewhere around there, because that is where your assignment is contained. Okay, so there is an assignment that follows up the lesson on the Globe Theater itself. The instructions are laid out there for you, but basically what you're doing is you're creating a digital comic strip using a program called Storyboard That. If you've used this program before, that's awesome. That'll kind of put you a little bit ahead of the game. If you haven't, though, I think it's pretty simple, and I think once you get in there, you'll kind of see how it works. But basically, like I said, you're creating a digital comic strip. You'll be able to drag and drop scenery and characters and objects and all sorts of stuff and put it together the way that you like it. Within those slides, I included a link to a video that kind of walks you through how to use the program if you're stuck, if you want to have that tutorial before you get started. Super helpful. It'll show you exactly what to do. And then once you are done with that, you'll see the assignments outlined there for you, kind of giving you detail on what you need to include in those comic strips. Once you're done with that, you need to share your work with me. Now, they have changed their settings in their program a few times, and I don't know exactly what the permissions are at this moment. I'm hoping that you're able to just download your work once you're done with it. If you can, download it, save it, send it to me. In Google Classroom, I'm going to create a drop space for you to submit this assignment. If the download button or feature does not work, you can go ahead and take a screenshot of your work. I've also included a video on how to do that in those slides. Or you can even take a photo with your phone. And then once you do either of those things, again, you can upload it into a Google Doc and then submit that document to Google Classroom. Either way, I want you to submit your work directly into Google Classroom. It's much easier for me to keep track of everything in that one spot as opposed to having to, cycle through my email and try to uncover it there if it gets buried. Okay. I hope that all made sense. I know that was a lot of information. Thank you for sticking with me. If you have questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. Again, my office hours are 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. today. I will be available live to get back to your questions basically immediately, unless I'm helping another student. After that time, my response will probably be a little bit delayed because I will be working on other things. So try to get to me during that 9 to 1 slot, okay? All right, I'm gonna let you guys go now. Good luck, have fun, be creative. I think you're gonna enjoy it, and I can't wait to see what you put together.